then, let's go. Let's get cracking. Episode 8, Coach Conversation. Jen, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, we had some really interesting feedback last week, didn't we? Coaching mistakes. Who knew the 10 Club would set that alight? Twitter and social media. It's good. Good. Yeah, I'm keeping well. Had a few days off this week. Press pause. How are you?
Yes, similar. Yeah, similar. I had a couple of days off. I've a couple of days off. Possibly not. I've been homeschooling, so I've learned a lot about Arctic foxes and subcontracting conjunctions. And this is year 2 as 6-year-olds homeschooling stuff. So when Dad has to Google what the hell's going on, it's slightly concerning, really. But yeah, everyone's got through the week and we're okay. So let's get into today, right? So we're going to start to look at and build upon last week with some top 10 tips.
Ta-da! Yeah, there's a few requests actually, wasn't it, that came in around that. So yeah, let's dive right in. Do you want to kick us off?
Okay, right then. So number 1, and Jen will add that clever bit along the bottom that makes it look like we know what we're doing. Yeah, so it is. There you go. Number 1. So for me, I think as a coach, spend some time putting together with some other people a development plan for yourself.
Ooh.
So think about the kind of things that you want to get better at as a coach, what you need to plan for, what you need to prepare for, what areas of strengths you've got, weaknesses you've got across everything to do with coaching, not just technical, tactical knowledge of the sport that you work in, but your coaching behaviors, etc. But here's the kicker. Get the people that you work with to input into it. So if you're a tennis coach, ask the tennis players that you work with about your coaching and what they think you should add into it as well. Not just your own views. Get the views of the people that you work with as well. Of many of the coaches that you've done that, I know that you do it a lot. Do they get the engagement from the others as well?
It's a lovely addition there. There's 2 parts of that stand out. First is having a plan. So possibly COVID has allowed people to press pause and pick and choose different webinars and forms of CPD and stuff, but having an actual plan. Is it a plan for like a short term or long term that you'd like to be able to top and tail things with? But then the additional part of getting other people's input, I love that. And like it links to a bit of the 360 stuff that I do with coaches, whether it's using, a survey question, simple question to X amount of people that how you perceived, all that kind of filters in. I love that. That's a great idea. And it doesn't have to be expensive or difficult, so it doesn't.
No, not at all. And take it to training with you. So, depending on the facilities that you've got, so that it becomes a live document, and if you happen to have a classroom because of the setting, like stick it on the wall behind you. So, you've got the athletes or players' development plans on the wall so they can share and input into each other's, so I can say, like, I think, Jenny, you've done this really great. So, add that on yours, but they can input into your plan as well. But it needs a little bit of bravery because you might hear some stuff that you might have been a bit, whoa, not so sure about that, but it's genuinely good feedback. So yeah, that would certainly be my first thing. Get yourself a plan.
Number 2, planning. So looking at the detail of a plan. We've spoken in previous episodes about planning for transitions or thinking about engagement pieces, but like a lot of coaches get caught up in cycles, macro, micro cycles or periodization. And that's quite daunting to look at that. And some may need that, but I'm just talking about a simple kind of loose plan that you might sketch down and not be afraid to go off plan, but also just to have an idea of what kind of things you're looking at. So it might link into the development plan of, I'm going to have X amount of time on this. I'm going to give this much responsibility to another coach or a parent who's helping out. I'm going to focus on, what did we say it was? 2 and 10, the 10 seconds intro, 2 minutes priming. I'm going to give that more time. I'm going to give the exit period a little bit more time. So the planning of a session and maybe what the week looks like. And the reason I thought that was important to put in, besides the obvious of having a plan, is that sometimes coaches make a plan for a session. They'll go to a coach game, or have some sort of event, or even another training session, and that won't inform the next one. and it needs to be linked. So not in like a, 6-week plan that you're all the way down there looking at, but just shorter little ones that feed into each other, so you can start to look at the improvements. So planning in general, planning a session, maybe number 2.
Yeah, it makes me nervous when I think coaches, they just turn up and go, right, well, I'm just going to coach what I see in front of me, because that's fine to a degree, but you get no kind of continuity and consistency of the journey that you're trying to go on with with the group of people that you're working with. So yeah, I think that's a really important one. So I'll add to that plan with some detail about really thinking beforehand your kind of interactions and interventions that you make. How are you going to do it? What are you good at with your interventions? What's your kind of go-to one? And I joked last week about my observation of rugby sessions, and they all want a really like big huddle and like kind of put your arms around each other, and that's one intervention style. But how do you plan for some of the interactions with different people as well? How do you plan, like we said, just to make sure that you check in with everybody at some stage during the session?
Gosh, that's brilliant.
Not linked just to the outcome that you want, but just for them as a person. So how do you plan for that? But also linked to it, most coaches work in pairs or more than one coach. So how do you plan for your interaction with other coaches? So, so if me and you are going to go and turn up at a session, if we already done some thinking to say, right, Jenny, you lead this bit, and I'm going to support you by just looking at your interventions or your coaching behaviors, or I'm going to just work with this kid because we know that this kid might need a bit more support. So, but it's a planned intervention and interaction between pairs of coaches, as well as just the kind of things that you might do yourself.
Gosh, I love that. If you just look at that and unpick that, I think the ripple effect of that would be massive. Like even just pausing to think of what you've said around interactions. Who would you interact with? We talked about parents last week and a couple of episodes before. You're talking about the athletes, all of them, some of them. Can we divvy it up so everyone gets some sort of interaction? Other coaches, maybe there's a committee member floating around. Thinking about those prior, not necessarily having, an outcome listed or a script that you're going to respond to. But I think that's really important. And the interventions, you said earlier on about behavior and stuff, like you can't predict them, but there's definitely scenarios that you could think about. What if this, what if that, and how might I manage that? Love that. Gosh, that's really powerful. Nice one. Number 4, top tip for me, number 4, role model. Now, we're generic on that term, but what I'm trying to get to is when we talk about knowing the athletes and getting that relationship to a great point where you maximize kind of their motivation and their interaction with the session. Some coaches that I've spoken with and witnessed over the last X amount of years, they think that's a friendship thing. So if I'm friendly with them and I meet them where they're at, I'll get more out of them. And that's where I want to reel that back in. I think it's having that boundary and being a role model around how you represent yourself. So are you in kit if you expect them to be in kit? Are you speaking aligned to your own values and the company kind of ethos, with the, not using language or not shouting at the wrong time and then expecting the athletes to behave in a different way? And just kind of living your values. And I know that's kind of a real cliched way, but what's really important to you and how you're perceived by others? And can you role model that? And I guess from a female perspective and the number of programs that I work in and out of, I'm always looking at the lack of female representation. So when you are there, there's so many athletes and so many coaches and parents wanting to thrive to be in that position. So there's always somebody looking and always somebody listening, even if you think you're on your own picking something up. So be a role model.
Have you worked with any coaches where you think they started not role modeling themselves and the right behaviors as well as they could have done, and have gone on a transition to become better at it?
Yeah. The amount of coaches who haven't had a support system or haven't had somebody to just check in and watch a session. Maybe they're working with 2 or 3 of the coaches, but they're all coaching at the same time in a performance space, or somebody's up on a track at 10 o'clock in the morning, or in a pool 6 o'clock in the morning, no one else is around. And it's maybe having a conversation with them, or them kind of thinking, right, like, how do I want to come across? How am I coming across? And I think it was episode 1 or 2, you made a great point around questioning and asking at the end of the session different questions to the participants. So I think all of that encompassed, you have a person who's not purposely doing anything wrong, but just not willing, or maybe not understanding where they're at and how they're being met and received, to go on that journey. And sometimes it's a simple conversation, and other times it's a bit defensive at the start. I don't do that. That's not, no, that's not what I meant there. And you got to let them teed that through with some things. But like it's different sports kind of bring different behaviors to the surface. So it's about unpicking what's important to them versus what they think is important, like being who they really are, as opposed to someone who they think they should be, or a new coach trying to make a standpoint, So yeah, it's been interesting to see all those.
It was a great couple of questions in there that you just kind of dropped in. How are you coming across, and how do you want to come across? I think they're really key ones for coaches to start to unpick and think about with their own kind of behaviors. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm staying on the kind of the planning and the session stuff, really. And the big one for me now is about questions, right? So I've seen this big shift in coaching over the years. Like, I didn't have any gray hair when I first started coaching. It used to be, right, very kind of command style, autocratic, stop, stand still, let me come in and show you because I know everything, right? And there was this kind of flip the entire opposite way to everything was just questions, to the point where, some of the under 14s at a professional club I was involved in doing some stuff with, the kids were just saying, stop asking me questions and tell me some stuff, right? And I think we have to find this balance between the two. It's definitely not all one end, but it's definitely not all the other. But the one thing I would say about questions is get beyond just an open and a closed question, and start to think about how you can structure questions based upon that particular person in front of you. So I'll give you an example. There was 2 kids in the academy that I used to work. One kid was very intelligent, very smart kid, tactically astute, very good at school. So I would have to ask him, right, what's the difference between playing 3v2 in a small space or playing 3v2 in a big space? Whereas one kid I could think of, who certainly wasn't the same as this kid, was at the opposite end of all of those kind of things. It was, right, where are you going to pass the ball? And it was very different questions because they were at very different places. So we start to talk about kind of low order and high order questions, where you're asking people to kind of compare and contrast the differences versus describe. So spend some time looking at questions and think about, right, based upon the people I've got in front of me, what types of questions do different people need, and how might I structure them to really challenge their thinking? So that's a real kind of, I guess, a teaching point for me that really starts to get under the skin of learning.
Gosh, that's so important. Well, what I was thinking about as you're speaking there is, what if the coach, and this is like a loose question back, what if the coach is afraid of what the answer is if they don't know? That's kind of, there's no, it's not directly you. I'm just thinking aloud of like, there's the how are you question, how was your day, the technical question, the tactical question, and your problem solving and their peer problem solving, and it's great. But I feel there's definitely some coaches who are afraid to ask that question if they don't know the answer to what the next question back might be. What do you think that kind of advice piece could be to a coach?
I think it's brilliant, because if you don't know, say you don't know. It's that bit of vulnerability, isn't it? It's somebody asks you a really good question back, as you go, wow, I mean, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Shall we find out together?
Yeah.
Or what are we going to do to try and work this one out? That's a brilliant question. What are we going to do to try and solve that? And kind of flip it so it's back to them, but you're saying that, you're not the font of all knowledge. And again, I think it's It's the mindset for coaches to get away from thinking of, right, I've got a badge, or I've been on a course, or I've got my initials on my top and it says coach on the back. Like,
so important.
I must know everything. But no, but it's okay. It's not a problem to say, look, I don't know, it's a great question, but how can we set up the next bit of the practice to find out? I did a golf coaching qualification, and I went to St Andrews to do it. Like, it was brilliant. It was a great experience. And I was working with one of the golfers that I was coaching, other candidate on the course. He had a handicap of 5, like way better than me. And he said to me in one of the practices that I put on, what am I going to do if I use a different club and the ball doesn't come out the way I want it to do? And I'm like, well, let's just go and try it. Let's go and see if you can make the ball come out a different way, and see how you can use and explore that shot. And then all I was thinking, right, was, so we were doing chipping around the green, was right. So I got a hoop and said, right, let's move the hoop to where you now think it's got to land in order to then roll onto the hole, based upon the ball's going to come out in a different way than you expect it to. So we started to play around with that. Right, well, let's move the hoop forwards or backwards. And I was like, right, I went into coach mode of, right, so we're working this out. I'm now going to give you a smaller target. So I gave him a smaller hoop and said, right, you roughly, now you got to land it in there. So we started to work on a different shot, a new shot, a creative one to solve the problem that came from a question that I didn't know the answer to.
Oh, amazing.
But you just kind of, I don't know, let's go and work it out, see what happens. Let's go and explore. Let's try it. Let's experiment.
Yeah. And it's the we part of that, isn't it? That's the powerful part, the we part. Yeah, absolutely love that. I think the next one for me would be, it's kind of linking a few of those together. It's about profiling. So if we talk about emotional intelligence and we look specifically at self-awareness and how you manage yourself, I think there's a lot of free things out there that will guide you in certain directions, different profiling and personality tests. And it really is just knowing a little bit more about yourself and your athletes. So I'm not getting into kind of knowing the people part, just saying about understanding and knowing what you're recording at the end of every session. So, like, are you documenting their progress from a process goal point of view? Are you looking at your own progress? So you talked about earlier having a development plan. Are you looking at developing something in every session? Are you profiling yourself, aware of what's going on with you in different situations? And are you aware what's going on with the athletes? And is that going down somewhere, even if it's in an Excel? And I know, like, there's profiling systems in different sports, but how are you recording and documenting, like, the numbers side of the game at the end of each session? And I think that's important. Now, like, the flip side is you could overanalyze that, but I don't know if enough people use that as a mechanism to get into a deeper level of understanding about the athletes, not just looking at rates of, like, perceived exertion or the kind of nitty gritty stuff. Literally just picking 5 or 6 things that you want to know at the end of a session, and then anything else in the comment section that you've noticed, off form, not as happy, asking questions, the small little nuances about each person that you might be able to profile. And I've kind of used an umbrella term there, but I didn't want to make it too big, just getting something down on paper at the end of every session.
Brilliant. Yeah, and that piece of reflection is crucial, right?
Yeah, and like the reflection in the car that you have. So, like, I didn't want to just label it as reflection, but it is essentially just thinking about the session and then representing that. So writing it down somewhere, sharing it with someone, but getting it down from a profile point of view on paper so that you can look back whenever the next session is, or Zoom as they are now. So yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Number 7. So this for me is a conversation I've had with a lot of people recently, and now kind of working across sport rather than one sport. Go and watch other coaches work in different sports and get out of your own bubble. And my experience is, certainly for working in football, is football coaches are very blinkered. They will stay and keep their learning linked to, I'm going to go and watch this other football person work. I'm an under 14 coach. I'm going to go and watch the under 16 coach work. Get out of your sport Go and see something totally different. Get a little buddy in a different sport and get them to come and watch you coach, and you go and watch them coach, because the amount of things that you can learn from going to a different sport is it's invaluable. And I think it's really, really important, and certainly one thing that we could all do better, I think.
Yeah. The program that I work on, the Performance Foundation program, at the end of the second cohort of coaches, we did the big reflection session, and everybody kind of reflected 6 months, 12 months, 18 months prior, what had happened, la, la, la. And that was one of the most valuable, it's in the top 3. Even though we didn't get an opportunity to visit everybody's different environment, they may have buddied up, they may have had communities of practice in different spaces, but it was really powerful. And sometimes it was just the simplicity of, oh, they're going through the same thing. Oh, here's a scenario that occurred for me. You're not going through that, but have you solved this before? And all of a sudden sparks fly, you know, fireworks. And it's just like, okay, here's a piece then. What would you ask? How would you advise somebody to approach that? So say they say, you know, I want to go to wherever, over to golf, and I want to have a look at a session. What am I looking at when I go there? How am I approaching that day or that session?
Yes, it's a great question. I had this conversation with a couple of lads yesterday that run a community sports scheme, and we had this exact conversation. So I said, right, well, look, if you've got a gymnastics club near you, or a golf club, if that's the example, what you need to do is just get hold of the head coach, the kind of person that tends to coordinate it, and explain what you want to do. Right, I want to get better at coaching. I'm a new coach, a level 2 coach, a level 4 coach, doesn't make any difference to me. I'd love to come and see some of your coaches work. Could you hook me up with one of the coaches that you think in your club would be the most receptive, that I could gain loads from coming to watch? Yeah. And then it's that conversation beforehand about, well, what are you going to look for when you're there, so you can start to plan some of that. Now, I had a guy, Ross, a few years back, South African lad, from Cape Town, sent me a message on Twitter, and he said, I'm doing a European road trip. And he's a rugby coach. I'm going to France to watch a load of rugby in France. I'm coming to London. Love to come and watch you work. You know, is that possible? And I was like, hell yeah, of course you can. So picked him up from the train station. We had an hour before just to talk about stuff, you know, just coaching stuff. He came in, and none of this kind of like, you know, stood off on the side of the pitch. I was like, no, you're here with me. You stand with me and you listen to what we say and the game, and we talk about that. Brilliant. Like, I mean, you have to make the move to go and do it yourself. Yeah. You know, and I'm not saying you have to go across continents. Like, you know, it's a massive thing for him to do, but what a fantastic learning experience, right? And there's open-minded coaches, regardless of the sport, that will have you in, because you can learn so much from it in different ways. So definitely do that for me.
Yeah, and I guess he's really lucky to have you as well, because I've been in environments where they do invite, but then they get protective and you're kind of behind a barrier, you're over there. But I've experienced similar. I went down to Bisham with another coach, a swimming coach, who wanted to watch a hockey session. So welcoming. We were in the middle of this, like the session was going on. We were on, listening here, listening there. It was like a carousel of things going on. And it was so, the riches of the conversation at lunchtime, the swimming coach was buzzing. He was like, I can't believe that. I've seen this here, you know, and that ripples then into going back into their community of practice and sharing that with other swimming coaches or the sports. So yeah, and like, you know, if you don't come across someone like you in that case that was really welcoming, somebody else will. So
yeah,
keep knocking, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's a brilliant one. Okay. This one, big advocate of this, mental health, well-being, always on my radar somewhere. And what slant I'm going to take on this is, if you do a good job, bloody reward yourself. Pause. And, you know, if it's around the reflective piece where you go, that was a good session, we've had a good success, victory there, reward yourself. Take some time and get to know what that reward is for you. Because if you don't tap into those little milestones, it'll just become, okay, next, okay, next, okay, next. And all of a sudden you'll find yourself, oh yeah, we won a European Championship last year. Yeah, it was good. Yeah. Can't remember really a lot of it. So enjoy the journey, and have those little things that work for you. I won't say completely switch off, because some people can't do that. So finding a different activity for you to to do. Have some boundaries around your phone and the amount of time you spend thinking about the sport. And I think just from a whole well-being piece, just a little bit of air, a little bit of exercise on a daily basis, to keep you kind of level and balanced is so important. It's the top tip on that one.
Absolutely. Yeah, bang on. So, and especially now, right? You know, I mean, yeah, make yourself go out and, you know, especially even when the weather's a bit naff sometimes, like it is here. Like during the first lockdown, when the weather was beautiful, you know, it was like centre parks around here, the amount of people that were walking and riding bikes. But that kind of drops off when the weather gets a bit iffy, doesn't it? But yeah, spend some time doing that.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, my last one. For me, it just underpins everything to do with coaching. Develop the whole person, right? So we're not talking about them as a performer or as an athlete or a player. We're talking about develop the whole person. Even if you are in a talent or performance setting, don't care, because we know that such a small percentage of people that enter sport go on to become elite. It's tough. It's super tough. But give them skills that are going to serve them well in life. So develop them to be better communicators, and develop sessions that focus on that as the outcome, not just the sport. So you can still get the tech outcomes if they're vital, but do it in a way where you focus on some of the psychological skills that underpin some of that, adaptability, resilience. How do you put on sessions that help kids concentrate better? Because that will help them be better in the sport that they might play, but it will also help them at school and in life and in work. And so it's a massive thing for me. For me, sport has the potential to develop people in incredible ways. And we cannot forget that. To just develop the whole person, not just the sport bit in them.
Yeah. I mean, it's so powerful, isn't it? Like, you think of like all the hours. I mean, coaches aren't the best paid out of all the industries you can go into. So there is that element of compassion and passion, if you want, around just developing the person. So if it's a whole person, can you imagine them taking those moments with you years down the line, using them in an interview, years down the line, loving just being physically active, still staying in contact with some of the people that they've connected with, which is hard if you have the pressures on your back of winning and getting funding, or, I don't know, the social perception of how you are as a coach because they've lost, 10 games or 5 people haven't returned. Like, I know there's loads of pressures that way, but it's massive, isn't it? The whole person element.
Yeah, what I tweeted a long time ago, and it went bananas on my timeline at the time. I think grassroots sport is not about the amount of trophies that you win. It is about the difference that you make to young people. And it is fundamentally at my core that is what it's about. But I'm even more so now. I think the talent pathway and the performance end is exactly the same. And when we spoke to Adam Burgess, GB paddler, who would have gone to Tokyo, world European champion, with a good chance of medaling, he's fortunate that he's hooked up with a coach called Craig Morris. And Craig is very forward thinking. And we said to Adam, what's he like as a coach? And he said, well, one of the big things is he just focuses on making memories with me. And I'm like, I mean, this guy is like at the sharp end of winning Olympic golds. And Craig is doing stuff that focuses on making memories. And man, that is, I am right behind that.
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, that for me will be my big one.
Oh, wow. Right. How do I top that? Top 10. Finishing off at number 10. I think you've probably alluded to there, and we did finish on this in a flip side last week, is if you know what good or great coaching looks like, then keep searching for people who exude that. Somebody that you can aspire to work alongside or be like, and keep driving along that path. I scan across the internet and social media that will show you different coaches, and then you could add that to your development plan and link all these people together. So find a mentor, find a role model, find someone out there.
Brilliant.
Wow. Oh gosh, that right. That we have covered quite a bit. So another episode down, top tips covered. Get in touch. Love to hear some more top tips. If you want to add to it, like some people did last week, you can catch us on Twitter at Coach Convo, which is down here, or email us coachconversation@gmail.com along here. And join us next week for the next episode and more stuff to come. Who knows what we're going to cover? But have a great week. Bye.
Bye.